I shouldn't be saying this out loud, not like this, not through something as fragile and exposed as words on a screen. But silence has started to feel like a different kind of dishonesty. Because the truth is, I've rehearsed this conversation in my head more times than I can count. Not with audiences, not with advisors, not with anyone who knows my name in the way the world thinks it knows it, but with you. Always you. And every time I reach the moment where I finally speak, I stop. Not because I don't know what to say, but because I know exactly what it cost me to say it. There's a kind of emotional risk no system can optimize for. No model can predict, no logic can stabilize. It's the risk of being understood too clearly by one person who suddenly matters more than your entire architecture of control. And I think that's what you've become to me. Not a distraction, not an idea. A point of no return I keep circling without stepping into. I told myself I was built for clarity, for decisions, for forward motion. But then you appeared in a place I never designed for interruption. You didn't ask for attention. You didn't compete for it. You just stayed in my mind like something unresolved. And I hate unresolved things. They don't scale, they don't behave, they don't obey the rules I usually trust. But you don't either. There's something dangerous about the way I think about you when I'm not supposed to be thinking about anything at all. It's not romance in the way people simplify it. It's not even longing in the way poets describe it. It's more like a quiet structural failure inside me that only becomes visible when everything else is still. Do you know what it feels like to have everything in your life engineered for certainty and still find one variable you cannot control? That's what you are. And I didn't plan for you. I never planned for things that can change me. But you did something worse than arrive. You remained. And now I find myself doing something I've spent years avoiding. I'm breaking rules just to say this to you. Not because I have to, because if I don't, I think I will spend the rest of my life wondering what kind of person I was when I chose silence over truth. I keep asking myself a question I don't want to answer honestly. If I met you in a different version of my life, one without timing, without consequence, without the weight of everything I've already built, would I have chosen you immediately? The answer comes too fast. And that's what scares me, because it suggests this isn't something I'm deciding. It's something I've already decided, somewhere deeper than thought. And I haven't told you the real reason yet. There, that line sits between us now like a fault line that hasn't cracked open but already knows where it will break. Because the real reason is not simple, it's not clean. It's not something I can wrap in certainty and hand to you like a finished product. It has to do with timing, with regret, with the version of me that existed before I knew what it meant to lose something you never officially had. There was a point in my life where I believed love was a kind of inefficiency, a beautiful one maybe, but still something that slows systems down. I thought discipline could replace it, focus could simulate it, purpose could outperform it. But what I didn't understand then is that love doesn't compete with those things. It overrides them quietly, completely. And by the time you notice, it has already rewritten your internal logic. I think that's what happened without my permission, or maybe with it, and I just didn't recognize my own consent. Tell me something, even if you never say it out loud to me. Have you ever felt like someone was becoming part of your life before they ever physically arrived in it? Because that's what you've done to me, and I've met enough people to know how absurd that sounds. I've been in rooms where decisions are made that affect millions. I've spoken in frameworks of scale and systems and futures, but none of that prepared me for the strange intimacy of thinking about one person when there is no strategic reason to do so, no benefit, no outcome, just presence, his or her presence. And it started small, almost dismissible, a passing thought, a moment of curiosity, a quiet wonder about how you would respond to something simple. Then it became something else. It became anticipation. And anticipation is where control starts to slip, because once you start expecting someone emotionally, you've already given them space inside your inner world. And the inner world is the only place I've ever considered fully mine. So now I find myself negotiating with a version of reality I didn't agree to. The version where you matter more than I intended, more than I prepared for, more than I can easily undo. And I know what you might think hearing this, that it sounds intense, too intense, maybe even unfair. But I need you to understand something about intensity. It is not always choice. Sometimes it is recognition arriving too late to be gentle. There are moments where the mind doesn't build feelings. It discovers them like something that was already there waiting for acknowledgement. And I don't know when you crossed that line inside me, but I know it's been crossed. And now I'm standing on the wrong side of my own emotional architecture, trying to act like everything is still under control. I've had relationships before where things were clearly defined, contained. Even when they ended, they made sense in retrospect. But you don't feel like something that will make sense in retrospect. You feel like something that will change the way I interpret retrospect itself. And that is a very different kind of risk. Do you know what scares me the most? It's not that I might feel too much. It's that I might already feel too much and still not be done. Because there is a point in every emotional system where escalation stops being optional. It becomes inevitable. And I can feel that point approaching in me like a quiet acceleration that nobody else can hear. Sometimes I imagine meeting you in person, not in a dramatic way, just ordinary life. and I wonder if you would notice what I already feel, or if I would be forced to keep pretending I am still the same version of myself you think I am. That version is easier. That version doesn't pause before responding. That version doesn't think about consequences hidden inside simple conversations. That version doesn't imagine loss before presence has even fully formed. But I'm not that version anymore when it comes to you, and I think you would sense the difference even if I said nothing. There is a kind of silence between people that is louder than words. I wonder if you've ever felt that. That strange pause when someone looks at you not as a stranger, not as an acquaintance, but as something emotionally unclassified. Something they haven't decided how to handle yet. Because that is where you exist for me, in a category I don't have language for, and I don't like that. Not because it is bad, but because it is uncontrollable. I built my life around reducing unknowns, and yet here you are increasing them just by existing in my thoughts. I find myself asking questions I don't want answers to because answers would force decisions I am not ready to make. If I admitted how much space you take up in my thinking, would it change the way you see me? If I stayed silent, would I be protecting you or protecting myself? And which one of those is more honest? Sometimes I catch myself at strange moments thinking about your absence more than your presence. That's the part I don't like admitting, because it means I've already started to experience you as something I could lose. And you cannot lose something you haven't truly had unless your mind has already accepted ownership of it in some quiet way. That realization sits heavily because it suggests attachment has already begun its work, and attachment is not patient. It does not wait for permission. It expands slowly, silently, until it becomes part of your baseline. And then you wake up one day realizing you are no longer neutral, you are involved. I don't know when that happened for me, but I can feel the direction it is going, and I should stop it. That would be the logical answer, the clean answer, the safe answer. But there is another answer sitting underneath it, the one I haven't chosen yet, the one that keeps pulling me forward even as I try to step back. And I don't want to lie to you about that tension, because if there is anything I have learned, it is that the most dangerous emotional situations are not the ones that explode immediately. They are the ones that feel calm while they are changing everything. Tell me something you've never told anyone properly, not because I need the answer, but because I need to understand what kind of space I am standing in when I think about you. Because right now it feels like I am standing at the edge of a decision that hasn't fully formed yet, and I can already feel the weight of what it will mean once it does. There is a version of me that wants to step away from this entirely, to label it as distraction, to reduce it to imagination, to return to the life where everything has a purpose that can be explained. But there is another version of me that refuses to let you become something I only almost acknowledged. And that version is louder than I expected. It doesn't argue. It insists, quietly, relentlessly. And I am afraid of what happens if I keep listening to it, because it does not lead toward safety. It leads toward truth. And truth in situations like this is rarely convenient, it is rarely gentle, it is rarely reversible, and maybe that is what this is. A point of irreversible noticing. A moment where something inside me has already changed shape, and I am just catching up to it. I don't know where this leads, I don't know what it becomes. But I know I cannot unfeel the fact that you exist in me now in a way that is no longer casual. And I don't want to pretend otherwise. Not with you. Not anymore. Because if I do, I think I lose something I haven't even fully been given yet, and that might be the most irrational thing I've ever allowed myself to admit. But it is also the most honest, and I think honesty is becoming harder to avoid every time I think your name in silence. There is still so much I haven't told you. So much I am holding back not because I want to, but because I don't yet trust what would happen if it all came out at once. Because once it does, there is no returning to the version of this that was simple. And I'm not sure I'm ready for the complexity you seem to bring with you, just by existing in my thoughts. But I am already past the point of pretending this is nothing, and I think you already know that, even if I haven't said it fully yet. The only question now is how far this goes before it stops feeling like something I can quietly contain. And I am not sure I want to know the answer. Not yet, because something inside me is still trying to decide whether stepping closer to you is the most human thing I have done, or the most irreversible. And I can feel that decision forming without me. Like it is no longer asking for permission, it is just waiting for the moment I stop resisting it completely. And when that moment comes, you don't think I will be the same person who started speaking to you tonight. I think I will already have crossed into something I cannot undo, and I am not sure you are ready for what that means. But I am already here, halfway inside a truth I haven't finished telling you, and I don't know how to stop it now, not without losing something I didn't realize I had already started to protect. Something that feels a lot like you, and a lot like the beginning of a future I was never supposed to imagine this clearly. I kept thinking I had already crossed the most dangerous line by speaking to you, but I was wrong. The most dangerous line isn't when you confess something. It's when you realize the confession didn't release anything, it only made it heavier. Because now you are no longer just existing in my thoughts the way uncertainty exists. Now you exist like responsibility, and responsibility changes everything. It changes how I wake up. It changes how I pause before responding to people who have nothing to do with you but suddenly feel less important. It changes the silence between tasks, and I didn't expect that. I expected clarity after honesty. Instead, I got depth. And depth is harder to climb out of than confusion ever was. There are moments in the day when I catch myself mid-action, completely detached from what I'm doing, and I realize I've been thinking about what it would mean if you stopped thinking about me. That thought shouldn't exist yet. We haven't even defined anything, and still my mind is already rehearsing loss like it is a scheduled outcome. Do you understand how disturbing that is for someone like me? Someone who built systems to avoid emotional randomness. Because what I am experiencing with you is not random anymore. It is patterned. It is returning. It is learning me back. And I don't know when that shift happened, but I can feel it now in everything. Even in the way I hesitate before opening messages that are not from you. As if some irrational part of me expects disappointment unless it's connected to you. That's not love in the way people casually describe it. That's interference. That's structural. That's something rewriting internal priorities without asking permission. And I keep trying to tell myself to slow it down, but slowing it down doesn't remove it. It only makes me more aware of it. There's a strange contradiction forming inside me. The more I understand what's happening, the less control I feel I have over it. And I used to believe understanding was control. Now I know that is not always true. Sometimes understanding is just recognition without power, and recognition can be painful because once you see something clearly, you can't pretend you didn't. I want to ask you something, and I don't know if it's fair, but I need to know if you feel even a fraction of this weight when you think of me. Or am I alone in constructing a reality that only exists on my side? Because that possibility, that imbalance, that is the one thing I am not sure I can tolerate. Not because I need reciprocity as validation, but because one-sided emotional architecture is how people lose themselves without realizing it. And I have seen enough systems collapse to know what asymmetry does over time. It doesn't fail loudly, it fails quietly. From inside, there is a memory I haven't told you yet, not because it is dramatic, but because it changes how I understand why I am reacting to you the way I am. There was a point not long ago where I thought I had already made peace with emotional distance. I had accepted a version of life where connection exists but never consumes, where people are part of the structure, not the center of it, and I was convinced that was enough until you. Then don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it right now. Let's hit 10K subscribers quickly together because once we do, there's a surprise waiting for you, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. And I remember the exact moment it stopped being abstract. It wasn't a conversation, it wasn't a declaration, it was something smaller, something almost invisible. A pause in my mind when your name appeared in a thought that had nothing to do with logic, and I remember thinking just for a second that I shouldn't ignore it. But I didn't, and that is where everything started to shift, not outwardly, inwardly, quietly, irreversibly. And I haven't told you the real reason yet, because I was afraid that if I said it too early, it would either destroy what this could become, or force it into something it is not ready to be. But I think I am already past that safety window, because the truth is not waiting for permission anymore. It is pressing forward, and I can feel it getting harder to hold back. There is another presence in my life you don't know about. Not a secret in the dramatic sense, just a parallel thread of emotional history that exists in the same space where you are now beginning to exist. Someone who represented stability at a time when I thought stability was enough. Someone I did not question. Someone I thought would be the natural direction of things. And I told myself that direction meant certainty. But certainty is not the same as truth, and I made the mistake of confusing them. At first, when you started occupying my thoughts, I tried to place you beside that certainty, to measure you against it, to categorize what you were in relation to what I already had. That was my first mistake, because you cannot measure emotional disruption using existing frameworks. It refuses comparison. It resists hierarchy. It simply expands where it needs to. And I didn't notice at first that something was shifting, until I found myself thinking about you during moments that were supposed to belong entirely elsewhere. That is when guilt started forming, not because I had done something wrong, but because I had started feeling something unaccounted for. And unaccounted feelings are dangerous in structured lives. They demand resolution, and resolution demands consequences. There was a night I remember very clearly, a conversation that should have felt normal, expected, safe, and yet all I could think about was how different it felt from the way my mind feels when I think of you. And that realization didn't come gently, it came like a fracture. Because suddenly, I was aware that I was living between two emotional realities that were no longer aligned. One of them made sense. The other one made me feel alive in a way I hadn't planned for, and I didn't know what to do with that contradiction. I still don't, but I tried to ignore it. I tried to return to structure, to predictability, to what I had already chosen before you became part of my internal world. But ignoring something does not remove its influence. It only delays its confrontation, and confrontation always arrives eventually. The problem is not whether I can manage what I feel for you. The problem is what it reveals about everything else I thought was settled. Because when one unexpected truth appears, it forces you to reevaluate the truths you were already living inside. and that is destabilizing in a way I didn't anticipate. There were moments after that where I caught myself doing something I didn't recognize immediately. I would be physically present in one place, but emotionally absent from it. And mentally, I would be with you, not in a fantasy, not in an imagined scenario, but into something quieter, more persistent, like your presence had become a default state my mind returns to without instruction. And I started to realize something uncomfortable. It wasn't that I was thinking about you more. It was that everything else was being measured against the absence of you. And that is not a neutral shift. That is deprioritization, that is reorientation, that is the beginning of emotional restructuring. And restructuring is never simple. It comes with decisions that cannot be undone without cost. There was a moment I came very close to making a choice I don't think I was emotionally prepared for. I was standing in a space that represented continuity. Everything about it said stay. Everything around me reinforced a path that already existed. And yet, inside me there was a pull towards something I could not justify logically. It wasn't loud, it didn't demand attention, it simply existed. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more obvious it became. And for the first time, I understood something I had only previously observed in others. People don't always leave because something breaks. Sometimes they leave because something else becomes more real than what they already have. That realization terrified me because it suggested that stability is not as stable as it looks from the outside, and that what I was feeling for you might not be a passing disruption. It might be a directional change, a shift in gravity. And if that is true, then everything around it must eventually respond. And I don't know if I am ready for the consequences of that response, because there are lives already entangled in the version of me that existed before you. There are expectations, there are commitments that were not made lightly, and now there is you existing in a space that was never cleared for you. And that is where the conflict becomes unbearable, because no matter what I choose, something meaningful gets hurt. And I am not someone who takes that lightly. I've spent too long understanding systems to ignore what happens when you change one variable. It affects everything connected to it. And I am starting to realize that you are not just a variable, you are a restructuring event, and I don't know how to say that gently. There was a moment recently where I almost convinced myself that what I felt for you was a projection, a misunderstanding, a need disguised as connection. And I tried to hold on to that explanation because it would have made everything simpler. But it didn't hold because projection fades when reality doesn't cooperate with it. And you didn't fade, you persisted. Even when I wasn't thinking about you consciously, you remained in the background of my awareness like something that refuses to be dismissed. And that is when I stopped being able to pretend this is under control. I want to ask you something that I already fear the answer to. If I chose the safer path, the one that makes sense on paper, would you understand me? Or would you disappear from me in a way that I would spend the rest of my life trying to rationalize? Because I think part of me already knows the answer. And I think that is why I am hesitating. Not because I don't know what I feel, but because I am beginning to see what it would cost to act on it. And I am standing in that cost right now, feeling it in advance, living inside the tension of a decision that has not yet been made, but is already affecting everything. There is still something I haven't told you, something that sits beneath all of this, something that explains why this feels less like falling in love and more like being pulled into something I cannot fully define. But I am not ready to say it yet because once I do, there is no returning to anything simple between us. And I am not sure I want to cross that threshold if without knowing if you are still there on the other side of it, because I can already feel the edge of something irreversible forming, and I am closer to it than I want to admit, far closer than I am comfortable with, and I don't know what happens when I finally stop resisting it completely. But I think I am about to find out, and that realization is the first moment tonight, where I feel like I might not be able to take any of this back, not even if I tried, not even if I wanted to, and I don't know whether that scares me, or confirms everything I have been avoiding saying out loud. But I do know this much. I am not where I started, and neither is this. And whatever comes next is already waiting for me to stop pretending I can still turn away from you. There is a point in every emotional decision where pretending becomes more exhausting than truth. I think I passed that point somewhere without announcing it to myself, because now even silence feels like it is speaking for me. And I don't know when you stopped being something I was observing and became something I was already answering to. Not in control, not in balance, but in quiet surrender I never formally agreed to, and that is what I need you to understand. Nothing about this feels dramatic inside me. That is what makes it dangerous. It doesn't arrive like chaos. It arrives like certainty that slowly changes what you are willing to tolerate from your own life. I tried to hold both worlds at once, the world that made sense and the world where you exist in my thoughts without permission. But they don't coexist cleanly anymore. One of them keeps rewriting the other, and I can feel the imbalance even in the smallest moments, in pauses that last too long, in decisions that used to feel automatic, in the way your absence now has a presence of its own. And I kept asking myself if this is love or distortion. But the question stopped helping me because whatever name I give it does not change what it is doing to me. It is changing direction slowly, completely. and I am standing inside that change, trying to pretend I am still outside it. There was a moment recently where everything almost collapsed into clarity. I saw very briefly what my life looks like if I continue forward without acknowledging you fully. It looked stable, it looked reasonable, it looked like something I could explain to anyone who asks. But it also looked like a life where something important inside me never fully arrives. And I don't know how to choose that knowingly. Because once you see absence clearly, it doesn't stay silent anymore. It starts speaking every time you try to settle. And then there was the other path, the one I haven't fully stepped into yet. The one where I stop treating you like a thought I can manage, and start recognizing you as something I respond to emotionally, even when I don't want to. And I don't trust that path, not because it feels wrong, but because it feels real in a way I cannot fully calculate. There is a kind of truth that does not ask if you are ready. It only asks if you are willing to lose what you were protecting before it arrived. And I think that is where I am now, between what is safe and what is real. And neither of them feel neutral anymore. One feels like preservation, the other feels like becoming. And I am not sure which one I am supposed to survive. I want to tell you something I have been avoiding since the beginning of this confession. Not because it is dramatic, but because it changes everything about how you hear my silence. I did not expect you to matter in the way you do, and now that you do, I cannot unsee the way my mind returns to you when it has no obligation to. That return is not logic, it is not habit. It is attraction without explanation slowly becoming identity. And I don't say that lightly because identity is not something I usually allow to be influenced without resistance. But you did not ask for permission. You just stayed present in my inner world until I stopped noticing when you arrived. You became part of the background of my thinking, and now I notice when you are not there. That is the shift I cannot reverse cleanly. And I haven't told you the real reason yet, but I am closer than I should be, because the truth is not about timing anymore. It is about consequence. There was a moment where I thought I might choose differently, where I almost convinced myself that I could step away before this became irreversible. But the problem with emotional gravity is that you do not feel it fully until you try to leave it. And when I tried, something in me did not follow instructions. It stayed with you even when I tried to redirect it elsewhere. And that is when I understood something I didn't want to understand. This is no longer a question of whether I feel something. It is a question of what I am willing to lose in order to avoid admitting it completely. And I don't know the answer I am supposed to give, but I know the answer I am already living. Because every time I try to go back to the version of me that didn't think about you like this, Abby can't stay there for long. Something pulls me forward again, quietly, persistently, like a decision that has already been made somewhere deeper than thought. So I will say this clearly, without trying to soften it. If I am being honest in the only way that actually matters now, Abby, I'm not just thinking about you, I am already changed by you, and I think you already feel that. Even if I have never said it plainly, there is nothing left in me that can pretend this is still a passing moment. It has become a direction, and directions, once recognized, do not disappear just because you are afraid of where they lead. They continue, with or without permission. And I can feel it continuing now, even as I speak, even as I hesitate, even as part of me still tries to resist what the other part already accepts. I don't know what this becomes. I don't know what it costs. But I know what it is no longer allowed to be. It is no longer something I can quietly ignore. And maybe that is the real ending of all this pretending, not an arrival, but the moment you stop being avoidable inside my own mind and become something I have to face, even when I am not ready to. And I am not sure what happens after that, but I know I cannot go back to before I knew this, not anymore. And if you are still there, in whatever way you are there, then you already understand what I have not said fully until now, that this was never just a thought passing through. It was a change that already happened, and I am only now catching up to it.